But I want to know what happened.
Well, it's been a week now. I can cycle to Hobbycraft, and I had these 3 great holes in my stomach.
Obviously, as a child, I must have licked the same sort of glue. Hello, and welcome to the Yarn Library podcast, where crafts, knitting, and all else fitting come to ponder and laugh. My name is Adam Cleveley.
And I'm Georgia Denham. You can find us both on Instagram, where I'm Chula Pearl, and Adam is Cleveley Knits. So, welcome back.
Hooray! Yay! It is welcome back. It's time for season 2.
Yes. So, today we're talking about learning in craft and learning in knitting. That could be how we first learned to knit in the earliest instances, maybe in childhood, maybe not in childhood, and then how we learn on a daily basis and how that learning continues through life. We're going to share some different stories of our own and then have some discussions. I'm going to introduce some ideas. And I mean, it kind of goes back to the original way that the way that we got to know each other by doing the ethnographic study. Because I was so interested and fascinated by actually how Adam learns to knit.
Because it's so completely unusual. I'm like that psychological case that's such an outlier. Like, what a peculiar person.
Well, it wasn't even that so much as just like, it was obvious that from where you'd first started knitting, you made such quick progress relative to maybe, you know, how I'd see myself knitting or other people. And I thought, what is going on here? What is the secret sauce? So maybe we could talk a bit about that. But yeah, I mean, first, housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
Do we have any housekeeping?
Well, I think we should talk just very briefly, Georgia, about making of this podcast and just... people will notice a few different things about this podcast. For one, anyone that's watching on YouTube, which I think is about half our audience, will see that we have different microphones. The balls of yarn are gone. And I know some people will be heartbroken to see that. It may be a temporary thing, but we have entirely switched platforms. Yeah. And as part of switching platforms, we have also changed the audio setup. There was nothing wrong with the... Well, I don't know.
Right. There was a lot of audio bleed between the mics we used before. And so that made editing really challenging. So we're taking a different approach. We're also going to try and be more prepared for our conversations.
And the other thing that everyone, we got lots of comments on, like people couldn't believe that we went roughly from 2 hours of recording down to about an hour of podcasting. But our ambition was always to create a podcast that was round about that 45-minute mark. Yeah. That's what we enjoy ourselves. Yeah. And when we sat down to record, we would record these long conversations, but what was really difficult is that we tried to address all of the points in that TV show, and that just took us a long time because we rambled a lot. Our intention this time, and I'm saying this at the beginning of the episode, we can hold ourselves to account at the end, our ambition is to provide a 45-minute episode within an hour of recording.
We're thinking like sweet spots somewhere between like 38 minutes to like 49 minutes, but don't want to go over the 50 mark, you know, that kind of thing. Because the problem was that as we went through Game of Wool, are we not allowed to call it Game of Wool? Are we calling it That Programme? Is that what, because you said That Programme? As we were going through Game of Wool, it was frustrating for us because we wanted to talk about lots of other things. And once we stopped having the 2 episodes a week, it meant that we didn't necessarily have an outlet for that. So it all got piled into one episode. Yeah. And then when you're editing down, it was a funny thing where if we go through and sequentially talk about all the contestants or all of the challenges, if we were editing sections out, it would literally be like, okay, let's cut this person and just not talk about them the whole week. So it meant that editing ended up becoming really finicky and detailed because I was trying to make sure that we covered all ground, but just slimmed it all down.
Well, and one of the other things you were saying was really difficult is where I, in particular, was making reference to different parts of our conversation throughout a podcast. Yeah. And therefore it made it like... It was very difficult to cut me out or to cut those chunks out because my referencing then didn't work properly.
Like in episode 10, there is the last one that went out before now. There was the bit where we had the wonderful joke about the benippled needles. But if I were to cut the whole section about me being in Hungary and my niece and nephew jumping on my needles on the sofa, which wasn't really that relevant, but was a funny story, a funny anecdote, ideally would have liked to cut that, but then we wouldn't have gotten the teats. We wouldn't have got Adam's teats.
So what we're saying, I think, Georgia, the conclusion we're coming to is that it's quite hard to edit down to, say, 43 minutes of
from 2 hours of content. Yeah. So
great content.
The good thing is now we don't have the restrictions of that program.
Well, I hope the irony is not lost on you, Georgia, that we've struggled to contain our just 2 hours of story into 43 minutes.
Now at least, because it's just on a topic, we could always break it down into smaller episodes, which is it's kind of nice. The other thing is quick turnaround. Like, the episode came out and then it was like, right, bam, into the next one. Now having had a bit of time to breathe and actually look up like how people actually make podcasts, they actually, believe it or not, they do a little forward preparation. They have little scripts and
I don't believe in
plans.
Preparation is...
Well, we both know that's not true. So, alas, we are here today.
Is that all our housekeeping done?
Yeah, there's probably some other bits and bobs, but we'll probably...
Let's remember them.
Future episodes. We've had lots of lovely emails. That's been wonderful. Yeah, lots of lovely reviews.
And we're about to address the only negative reviews we've had, I think, because the only negative ones were you talk too much about that TV show.
Yes.
And as of now, we're not talking about it because we've got a whole new series to record.
So many lovely 5-star reviews, and that's been so nice. Like on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which all helps spread the word. I sound like a person who has a podcast. That's all been really lovely. But there was one review on Apple Podcasts that was like nothing about what they say in the. They said something about it's not what is in the description. They just talk about this TV program. And I've listened to X number of hours and they're still just talking about the TV program. But I thought that we had discussed and made it clear to our audience that the reason we had stopped doing the other alternate episodes is because of workload and that we were going to go back to doing something else. So if you would like to help our overall rating increase on average... I feel like I should have asked this at the end once we've delivered the goods. But maybe it will help our own feelings of self-esteem and disappointment that we got trolled. I think that the person's username did have a fairly scathing username, something like exterminator, something or other. So yeah,
not fuzzy, cozy, warm, supportive.
It wasn't like cozy yarn 123. It was like exterminator. So there we go. Anyway.
Well, apologies to that person that thought they'd be getting a whole series on something other than Game of Wool when I thought we said, yeah. Anyway, that's the last of it. That's the last of it.
Your series is here, Exterminator 123.
Come back and listen.
So, learning.
Where are we starting? Are we starting with us learning?
Let's start at the beginning, Adam. So, I want this conversation to be not just about knitting. It is a broader craft conversation, broader life conversation really about learning and how we learn. We first got to know each other through knitting, and we've had this conversation before, and I love your story about this. I'd love to start with how you learn to knit. And I know that's like a two-pronged story. So yeah, Adam, tell me about how you learned to knit.
I mean, there's two memories that come to mind when I think about how I learned to knit, because there's both learning as a child, which was one style of knitting, and then there's learning as an adult, which is more what people know as knitting. As a child, I was shown finger knitting by my cousin. I'd gone to stay with him in London at the weekend. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, something like that, and I was shown how to finger knit. That basically you loop this yarn around your fingers, and then you just sort of are folding and you're turning loops over loops and so on. And you generate what I now know is basically this long I-cord. I just obviously was immediately physically addicted to doing it. And I think physical yarn addiction's a thing. Don't laugh at it. And then my auntie then took us. We went out to a shop. We went yarn shopping. I didn't know that was a thing, but really I was introduced at a very young age by my pusher aunt.
It's all making sense.
And I chose this green ball of yarn, and it must have been, I'm guessing now based on the feel of my 8 or 9 year old hands that it was an Aran weight. It was maybe it was a worsted weight. Maybe that's why I love worsted weight yarns now. But I played with it endlessly, and I remember that weekend we watched films till late at night, and I would just rework this I-cord. I'd make the whole thing, and once it was done, I would unravel it. It was a toy, and I would unravel the whole ball of yarn, and I would do it again, and I just be doing it again and again and again. And then sometimes what I would do is, once I had this I-cord, is I'd experiment with, well, what happens if you make an I-cord out of an I-cord? Well, it turns out you make a really fat ball of yarn.
Fat I-cord.
But it was terribly satisfying unraveling it again.
Yeah.
And I just loved that process. And I remember, I mean, as a child, you never know as a childhood memory whether that was something that I did actually about 4 times across 2 weekends, or whether it really was something that I did week after week and month after month, watching, when I was watching cartoons on a Saturday morning or whatever. But then that sort of stopped and it went away, and I never thought about it again.
And that was all like the finger knitting. So you never actually got the needles in there?
No, that was entirely, it was entirely finger knitting. It was only ever basically that ball of yarn. I remember then being a little bit fascinated with knots when I had a friend at university that was really good at knots, as it turned out. He showed me them, and I was able to pick those up really quickly. I was able to understand where yarn went, essentially.
What were you studying at university again, Adam?
Engineering, economics and management, John.
Engineering. Okay.
And then, that's another example of where I think there was a strong memory, because again, there was a really complex knot called a monkey fist. Calm yourself down.
I'm not saying anything.
And that's a complicated knot to work, but again, I was fascinated by it and I loved it. It's a very satisfying ball to make. It makes this big monkey fist, and it's a very satisfying ball to have. We're just gonna gloss over it. I'm trying to keep a straight face. And then I was how long ago is it? 40 years ago now? 4 years later. 4 years ago. God, I'm getting old. That I learned to knit properly with needles. I say properly as needles. That's derogatory of me on other forms of knitting.
Wait,
but
40 years ago
no, 4 years ago when I was 40. That's what I'm confused about.
Because I was like, it sounded like you said, yes, it's been 44 years since I learned to knit with needles, and I thought that's not adding up.
I know people are going to look at me and think he's only 70. I can't believe he's any older than that.
It's all the Botox.
I'm in my early 40s.
Retinols.
Early 40s.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Carry on.
So, well, that's part of my origin story. And then I've got this sort of second coming, which was when I was having this random chat with someone, basically at the office, or it wasn't. It was in COVID, so it was on Zoom.
This was like 2021, maybe, was it?
Yeah. 2021, 2022. We were just talking about New Year's resolutions, and Maddie said to me, don't laugh at me about my New Year's resolution. And she was really embarrassed to admit it. And she said, I'm going to learn to knit. And I just said, that's a really good idea. And it just clicked with me. I was like, that's it. I'm going to learn to knit.
That's a nice New Year's resolution. I always try and avoid having New Year's resolutions where they're like a bit too harsh on yourself, that it's actually something positive, additive.
I hate New Year's resolutions. I don't make them. But I firmly believe, like, if you want to change something, you want to do something, why are you waiting until the new year to do it?
Yeah.
Like, if it's important to you and you want to do it, just pick a moment in time and just do it.
Yeah.
I have this real problem with any round numbers, frankly. And like, why does it have to be the 1st of January? Also, 1st of January, for most people, the most common kinds of New Year's resolutions are going to be, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to stop eating unhealthily, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I don't know about anyone else, but I really have a hangover on the 1st of January. That's not the time I'm going to make that resolution. But, the 2nd or 3rd week of January thinking, why don't I try something new? Yeah. And I'll steal someone else's New Year's resolution and learn to knit.
In a weird way, I suppose I had a similar thing of it being a New Year's resolution in that I started at the beginning of my PhD, at the beginning of the academic year, and it was a similar kind of conscious. No, I'm going to learn to knit. It was a very decided moment. I want to circle back to you because Maddie, your colleague, had said, "Oh, don't laugh at me. I'm going to learn to knit." But then. Please carry on.
We both then started learning to knit. One of the things that unlocked me very early on was that I could just knit in an office environment. When we went back into the office, in our one-to-ones, part of our one-to-one was, what are you knitting at the moment? Let me see what you're doing. And we talked about it. And I don't think that it detracted at all from the amount of work we had to do or our working relationship in any way. And in fact, there was a significant amount of time where I think it was really useful, because when you're knitting, that's when I found that by knitting, it kind of unlocks different parts of your brain to be able to engage in different sorts of conversations. And so that then enabled me very quickly to be comfortable with, well, do you know what? I'm going to knit in other meetings and see what happens. And so that was, it was a sort of powerful extra tool for me in terms of what else I do in the workplace. And yeah, I mean, I don't work in an office routinely now like I did then, but I still use that as a tool, and I still knit in meetings, partly as a way of helping me stay focused on some things, but also as a way of, in a way, disarming other people or creating more ease in a meeting. It works superbly well.
It is a kind of an icebreaker. I know we've had this conversation at various points, and it's definitely something that I'd want to talk more about, is this whole knitting in public or knitting at work. Okay, so what were the first few things that you knitted?
Well, so the first thing that I knitted, which some people are surprised by, is a reversible cabled scarf. So, because the thing that I wanted was texture.
Yeah.
That's what I crave in my knitting. It's what I started out wanting, and that's what I still want. And so I wanted to know how to cable.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was research what a cable is. How do you make it? And once I understood that, it's like, cables, you can't see them on the back. Well, that's useless for a scarf. Surely there's a way to make a reversible cable, which, lo and behold, if you make it with a rib in it, it is reversible.
Yeah.
And then so I designed. Again, I didn't know anything about patterns. Why would you? That wasn't how I was learning to knit. I was learning to knit on the basis that if you want something, you visualize it and you manufacture it.
Yeah.
And therefore, I made this simple 1x1 rib or 2x2 rib, then with a cable up the middle of it, chunky scarf. That was the first thing I knit, and then I knit a matching hat, which is horrible. It's got full of holes, but it is the first thing I knit, and I'm not throwing it away.
Summer Lee, the designer, she's got another book coming out soon. She does amazing sock patterns. Also great YouTube channel, and she's also got background in photography, so it's just on point. She has this lovely story about how the first sock that she knitted, now she's queen of socks. I mean, she might not describe herself as that, but I'm calling her the queen of socks. She says that the first sock that she knitted, she threw away, and she wishes she kept it, and she wishes she could have it in a frame on the wall.
Yeah.
And knowing now all that she's done, and she's got her second book. So yeah, returning back to those early projects, do you still have them, presumably?
I absolutely have them, yeah.
Yay.
And I get from time to time they make it out onto my Instagram, because I feel like it's an important thing to show people, and I don't show really the scarf and talk much about that, because that's, in a way, I think it's too much of an unusual first project.
Yeah. And
so I don't think it serves any use to anyone else to see it. The hat, though, is brilliant, because the holes and it has real problems in tension around the decreases, and it is awful, and it has this horrible point to it. It's so badly shaped, and that's what I love about it, because I loved it at the time, and it was important to me at the time, and it will always be important to me because it was the first hat that I made.
Yeah.
But now, as a knitter who's more accomplished, I could, anyone can see flaws in it, and that's what I like to use it for, is to point out flaws, because I think that's so important. Like you say, on Instagram, on social media, there is so much of that. In order to gain traction, in order to gain presence in an audience, part of what you have to do is fill this beautiful idea of what knitting is, and the photography is important, the beautiful finishing's all important. And I feel like that leads you down one particular path. I don't feel like it's helpful for people learning. Yeah. And that's, I think that's where my heart is I like helping people learn. So how did you learn, Georgia? I mean, it's a totally random question to ask you, but I
just first wanted to congratulate you on your wanting people to learn. It's very fitting for the subject of our podcast today. What we like. Sorry, Adam, I believe you're about to...
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about how you learned to knit.
Oh, well. So similarly to you, there was a two-pronged situation. So I first learned to knit when I was a little girl. I was maybe 6 or 7. And it was my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, my dad's mum. And she she taught me to knit with these big chunky, wasn't chunky. I think it was probably like a worsted kind of situation, or maybe Aran. And these big thick needles, they were wooden. And I remember weirdly, like one of the little knobbles on the end would come off, and I kept licking it, and it tasted of like weird glue that was probably totally not safe for me to put in my mouth. But
rather than normal glue that you lick.
Yeah. It was just like, I don't know, it tasted tangy.
What's really strange is that as you said that word tangy, I absolutely had the taste of a tangy glue in my mouth. I don't know how I know, but obviously as a child I must have licked the same sort of glue.
Well, in my childhood reminiscence, I didn't expect the tangy glue to be the first thing that came out. I've certainly not told you that part before. But alas, I was really close to my grandparents when I was little, so I used to go to stay with them every weekend on a Saturday night. So they'd pick me up on Saturday morning and I'd spend the weekend with them, or the rest of the weekend, and I'd come back on Sunday. And so I would see her on a weekly basis. She didn't teach me to cast on, she just like cast on for me and then showed me how to do the knit stitch. And so it was just going back and forth, knit stitch both sides. It didn't know how to do any increases or decreases or anything. But what would happen was I'd go away for the week, I'd knit, and maybe drop a bunch of stitches or do whatever, and then turn back up the next weekend and then be like, look, Grandma, look what I did. And then she'd have to like do the corrections or change bits and bobs. Mm-hmm. That went on for a couple of weeks, or, you know, like you were saying, was it a couple of weeks? Was it longer? I don't know. But I was absolutely obsessed. You know, I'd come back and I'd have done this like huge stretch of this knitting. And then I think we had some like wear a tie to work, to school day or something. So I decided to knit a tie.
Amazing.
But it was in this big chunky yarn. And then I think I hadn't realized that you could do decreases to go to a point. And so I thought that that I'd have to do increases to then fold it over and sew it. So I ended up having this weird conversation with my grandma and ended up with this like scarf which like flayed out the bottom end. And I think it was just miscommunication basically between me and my grandma. So I ended up with what was effectively, it should have been a tie length, but it ended up being a scarf because I had just been so into it and had knit so much. I won a prize at school for like having knit this little tie scarf, and that explained that the end was, you know, had to sew it on in the right way. And then this girl at school for years used to call me Scarfy Scarf and said I cheated.
What?
Because it was a tie competition. Like, you know, you had to wear like a tie. And it just like, it always upset me because I was like, but I made it with my grandma and it was a tie. It was supposed to be a tie, but I just got confused about the end and it went out instead of in. Anyway, so that was all early on. And then I kind of had this moment of discouragement. And this comes into the whole thing about learning, about like how you learn, who teaches you and what that environment is like, and creating a supportive environment for something. So much love for my grandma. Like, she taught me to do so many things, to bake, to measure ingredients, to make scones. So, you know, I think about her every day in that respect. She taught me to knit as well. But when I really wanted to knit something and I didn't have her on hand to cast on for me, I set up some knitting by basically, I thought, well, I've got to knit into these little loops. So I tied together these like little bits of yarn, and it wasn't actually yarn that was appropriate for the size of the needles that I had. It was like super thin yarn that I think must have been kicking about the house, or I'd seen at a charity shop or something. And so I tied together all these little tiny knots that weren't connected to each other. So it was just like curtain rails or something, like curtain,
right.
What would you call it? Like curtain loops. Yeah. So little tiny loops. And I just knit into that and then went back to her. And I was so excited and proud that I'd knit. And
that's really ingenious.
Thank you. Cambridge.
Did you do engineering?
So I did this like thing, and then I knit into it with these big, so effectively it kind of looked like lace in a way. I'm not supposing to say that I did lace, but in the sense that if you knit with really big needles on thin yarn, then it's going to be
lacy.
It's lacy. It looks lacy.
Yeah.
Went back to my grandma, and rather than being like, wow, this is so ingenious, and bless her, she's been really interested in doing this, she really wanted to do it, I got basically chastised for, well, I don't understand what you done this for. We can't do anything with this. We're just going to have to unravel it. You should have waited. And I was so disappointed and so like sad and ashamed. My grandma's not with us anymore, which is part of the story as it goes on. But
so that's why you're happy to just diss her publicly, internationally. She can't fight back.
Well,
do you want me
could have been a different scenario.
Do you want me to take the position of your grandma? I'm sorry, Georgia, but you absolutely did the wrong thing. And why the hell didn't you put the effort in properly or wait for her?
But this is the crazy thing. It's just like, I think about, because I do so much stuff about skills and learning. I'm writing a chapter now on skills and learning, hence probably why I reached for this topic suggestion. But that was such a moment where I could have been encouraged a different way. And in that story, I feel like...
Encouraged a different way or encouraged, as we know
just encouraged. And so in that story, I kind of see the mechanisms of when learning can go south, or where someone can get disinterested or have like a passion kind of stifled. So I basically don't really remember knitting after that at all.
That's so sad though. But I think that's also a generational thing that's that's very much changed over time, how you give feedback to children. Because my piano teacher was again so she's probably the person that taught me the most about something creative or artistic, because I was playing piano, but she taught me from when I was 5 to basically 20, and she was my grandmother's kind of age. But the highest level of praise that I could get from her was, "That's not bad." Yeah. A small sort of like, not bad. Yeah. That was the most I could ever hope for from her. I didn't know at the time, but I learned so many Dutch swear words. When I would say these words, and I didn't think anything of them because my piano teacher would say them all the time. I was a 6 or 7-year-old that knew the worst words in Dutch.
This podcast has to be clean, Adam.
I'm not going to say them.
Later, you can tell me all about your Dutch swear words. And
we got George's impression.
Wait, what were we talking about?
So we got to the point where you were criticised for using the wrong size needles and yarn together.
So from there, was definitely poking around sewing patterns and making clothes and stuff. That was a very natural part because I was in a family where women in my family sewed. I had to do all my scout badges and stuff and sewed all of those on. So I was always doing stuff with textiles. And I think also because I was very tall, I had to adjust a lot of clothes and make a lot of clothes. So that was always very normal for me. So going back to those conversations we had about Holger and some people saying, oh, no, there's no transferable skills. But actually, like you said, you never really thought of doing patterns or how things were constructed. In a way, I didn't necessarily think about, oh, you have to have a pattern. But I had this sort of contextual knowledge from mucking about with a sewing machine and mucking about with some embroidery or mending things, letting the hem down on a skirt or a dress or something. So that was all kind of contextual, but didn't knit. Like absolutely didn't knit. And I think it just passed me by for quite a long time. And then it would have been 2022, a year after you. I was starting my PhD and there were two events that were sort of triggered us. I saw a family friend, a lovely lady called Ione, who knew me very well when I was little. And she's got grown-up children who we all grew up together. One of those older children, Charlotte, who I called Lartet when I was little.
It's a cute name.
So Lotte has her own children now, which is wonderful. And when she had her babies, I only knitted these gorgeous things for them. And there was something that like triggered in the back of my brain because that summer, that was the last time I saw my grandmother where I could kind of have a conversation with her because she had dementia. And so from there, it was just kind of a really sad, slow decline. And we didn't talk about knitting at all then or anything like that. But I had this sense of, I was going through all these family photos with her and trying to figure out who was who and things. It was just before I was kind of settling down in Cambridge to do the PhD. And I had this sense of like, I only knitted this thing for her grandchild. My grandmother taught me to knit. And then once my grandmother isn't here anymore, and once she forgets, this skill is going to die in our family. And I want to be able to knit things for my children. I want to be able to knit things for my grandchildren. And I want to be able to teach them to knit in the same way that my grandmother did. And so I had this very like conscious moment of, I want to learn to knit now. So I'm not rushing it when I'm a couple of years down the line and I'm like, I'm broody and I want to make blankets and things. I didn't want my grandma's passing, and she passed away last year in the spring. And I didn't want, when she left us, to not have that memory intact. And have that knowledge, that thing that she taught me all those years ago. Unfortunately, I decided to do this when I was recovering from an abdominal surgery, when I totally shouldn't have been cycling to Hobbycraft. But I became overwhelmed with this, like, no, I need to learn to knit. And the funny thing is, after I'd had this surgery, it was for my endometriosis. The thing is, they said, get back to your normal everyday activities. My normal everyday activities as a former rower was like 10 sessions of training a week. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm all right to cycle to Hobbycraft. And I got there and I thought that this was a terrible mistake, like really bad.
How many days after surgery are we talking?
7.
Okay.
And like to the hour. And I thought, well, it's been a week now. I can cycle to Hobbycraft. And I had these like 3 great holes in my stomach.
They said 1 week. It has been 1 week. I am going.
I will return to my normal duties of rogue impromptu trips to Hobbycraft. So I turned up and I bought the yarn that actually became this jumper.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. And some different needles. I bought this book about like sustainable knitting, which was weird because even though it was sustainable knitting, it just told you yarn you had to buy rather than like using what you had, which I was like...
printed on bleached inorganic paper. And
yeah. So I started figuring out how to knit from that.
I love that your knitting origin story also includes like, oh, well, to do this properly, I'm also going to research about this X, Y, Z. How can I be more Georgia?
Doesn't mean... So,
it's a good thing. It's a very pure expression of you. Like both the determination, like, right, I've had my time, I've done my recovery, now I'm going to go and learn to knit, and I'm going to learn more about doing knitting really well in a really ethical way because that's what I believe in.
I always talked to a friend about this the other day. Prior to me coming to Cambridge, all of that you're describing is like the Georgia vibe. That did not make me a popular person. I was not a popular gal. And then I came to Cambridge, and then suddenly it was like, oh my god, like what? I'm in the plastics. Like what is this?
That total rejection. No,
Okay.
but I'm just going to gloss over it.
It's Mean Girls. It's like Regina George.
How did I not get a Mean Girls reference?
Wait, do you know Mean Girls?
Obvious. I'd say obviously. I mean, why would that be obvious?
This is giving you context.
But there was a whole series of films around that time from Legally Blonde onwards, where that was my gateway film into that niche.
Got you.
I didn't watch. I think was it Mean Girls 4? I wasn't watching that. That was too much. But
the Mean Girls sequels are terrible.
They really are. I feel like the first one I watched it a few times, but I feel like it wasn't as strong because obviously it's not based on the great literature of Jane Austen in the way that Legally Blonde is. But there we go. We digress.
Legally Blonde is based on the literature of Austen. I thought that was.
Oh, sorry, I'm confused.
Clueless.
That's Clueless. I'm mixed up.
Because I listened to Emma over the holiday and I was thinking, wait, which one's Legally Blonde? I'm pretty sure.
You're absolutely right because it's
L words, a Gemini vegetarian.
I'm just going to get myself
My
tied in
favourite.
knots.
Have you ever seen the Legally Blonde the musical?
No.
It's so good.
Is it?
It lives rent free in my head all the time. Like all the time. Oh my god, you guys. Looks like Elle's gonna win the prize.
I think we found our new intro music for the podcast there. It's amazing.
Oh my, it's just so good. It's so good, so good. Whenever it's on, I really try and go. Anyway.
I really thought ammonium glycolate was going to be a bigger thing in my life than it was going to be bigger in my life than it actually turned out to be. What a shame.
Alas.
We digress.
I think that this is a good ending point for...
But I want to know what happened after you. I mean, you made this jumper. You can't stop there. I'm just telling you our digression.
Actually, what I did was I bought 2 different weights of yarn. One was DK and one was Aran, and then knitted this stripy thing, trying to follow this sustainable knitting pattern thing of like, oh, you cast on X number of stitches, do this in ribbing. So I learnt to purl, and it was weird because the muscle memory or the faint memory of like how I was knitting when I was a child was like it was there. It was like it was suspended in my hands, which totally makes sense. But it
like
was
riding a bike.
Yeah, and it was there all those years later. So I learned to knit in the round, and then thought as it was getting close to the top for this, what was effectively going to be like a sort of a vest tunic type thing. I thought this is ugly as. And that it needed sleeves. And actually, because I'd knitted not with the suggested cotton of the pattern, because I didn't understand anything about you got to use this to I wasn't there yet, right? I thought I could put some sleeves on it because I've made all of these garments, I've made all of these tops and adjusted things. It wasn't that freaky to me to think, oh, well, it's roughly the shape. I could do some decreases, figure out how to do those. And effectively, I know the numbers won't quite add up, but I'll figure it out because I thought I just need another pattern to put arms on it for like a men's jumper and then it will fit Dima. So I went to a yarn shop to try and get advice on like, hey, so I'm knitting this and I just want to get another men's yarn, another men's pattern that has some sleeves on it, and then put the sleeves on it. So then the person who was in the yarn shop was like, cut that idea down straight away.
Were they dismissive of it
They
as well?
were very dismissive.
Just like being with your grandmother again.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, it was very much like, no, you're a beginner. You shouldn't be doing this. You should start again from scratch. Like, just finish this and it'll be a nice tank top. And I just felt really deflated because I'm like, hey, I'm turning up and like, this is the first thing I've done. Then I ended up I didn't leave enough space for the neck. So then I did some steeking. That was fun. For quite a while, I was cut into my knitting before I mentioned it in a knitting group. And then people went, what? So I was doing random stuff, kind of like you're describing. There's an experimentation that was happening in me being separate from the usual roots.
I think this is fascinating because what you're describing is very similar as well to my experience, where when you're left to your own devices and it is about your personal ambition to create something, then there is no limit to it. And you can just say, this is what I want to visualize. This is what I want to do. And left to your own devices, you can just go off and do it.
Yeah.
If you go into a group of people who have learned in a very structured way, where you have to have produced 19,000 yards of stockinette knitting before you can progress onto anything else, there is every chance you're going to be held back and told, no, this is the sequence in which you want to do it. The number one thing that matters for getting through early knitting projects is passion. Because that's the only thing you've got. That's the only weapon you've got against the boredom, the frustration, the difficulty, is passion. That's the only thing that's going to carry you through. No one else can tell you, make another stitch, do another row. You have to find that in yourself. And the only place that comes from is, I want to do it. But as a new knitter, you're full of fear as well, because it is totally unknown. It's sad, but I completely understand why, that your grandmother, in a way, stopped you for a while. She didn't defeat, that wasn't the end of it. But it was the same. You had that same experience walking into a shop.
Yeah.
And I took that cabled scarf back into a shop and I said, this is what I've knitted. I want to do something else. And I explained the next project I wanted to do. And I cannot tell you how dismissive they were of, well done for trying.
Yeah.
Why
we need to start at the beginning again.
Yeah, start at the beginning again. Got to buy that big ball of acrylic over there. And
that's why I was so interested from a PhD perspective. Like, I was starting my PhD on trying to understand how composers learned things. And I wanted to look at different interdisciplinary approaches. And at first I was thinking of looking more at like company onboarding and like different training approaches for different companies. There's a big difference between like creative practices and then corporate practices, where they have the infrastructure, the funding, the time to be able to actually train someone. If you start in a company and you have like 6 weeks of onboarding or learning how to use the system or whatever, that will happen in a way that they know, fingers crossed, is going to work, and you're still getting paid whilst you do that training. When you're in a creative situation, when you're freelancing, you're not necessarily getting paid for that time, because you've got to develop the skills yourself to be able to be in a position then to deliver your services as a composer. So I was interested in that kind of conflict and tension, not at all to say, okay, well now actually composers need to learn in this very structured corporate way, but I wanted to understand more about what was actually going on there.
So Georgia, that makes me think so much about an example that I have from my professional life, and I want to talk to you more about that. Should we do it as a part 2? I
like this. It's filling me with editing joy, because I know that actually it's not going to be like, oh, right, we've got a big long episode that we then have to split in 2, but actually rather we're going to make
a 2-parter.
We're going to make a 2-parter.
We've laid out, I hope, what's an interesting. It's an exposition. Well, we'll find out whether we're interesting, won't we?
I like having our origin stories.
I think it's important to have them out there.
Yeah. It also really sets the scene for like going into learning on it.
But I really want to wrap this episode up now, because I need to record episode 2, because I need to tell you about why that is so important to me.
Fine. Well, thank you for listening to Yarn Library podcast.
with me.
Wait, no, that is actually a recorded outro.
Amazing.
Yeah. And there might be different music now as well, because
you're going to sing it. Are we done then?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yay.
High five, Georgia.
Woo! You've been listening to Yarn Library podcast with Adam Cleveley at Cleveley Knits and me, Georgia Denham at Tulip Pearl. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share and subscribe. And if you didn't, shh.